Thank you, Karen, and thanks to all of you for being here today on a end of the day Monday, beginning your week. I'm sure it was a very full day, as they all are with when we're working with children and families. And so, gratitude for your time here. Let's see if we can make good use of that too, so that we're a little more inspired, a little wiser together about how we want to interact with children. I'm Jonathan Fribley, a longtime early childhood educator, and more recently involved in work around supporting both early literacy and children's cognitive skills, and now working with a nonprofit that supports educators. And I think I want to start out just by acknowledging everyone that makes our work possible here. There's Karen and all the folks at the center in Illinois who are unflaggingly here to help us do these webinars. You folks as well, right? And I want to express my gratitude to sort of everybody who I'm going to be leaning on today, which is everyone from researchers I've had the privilege to interact and read from, and lots of educators who I've had the opportunity to be in their classrooms with and think with them about how we interact with kids. Um, Here's the short version of what we're up to today. Our focus is guiding children in building language. And I expect we're all here in part because we know learning language is one of the major cognitive tasks of early childhood and also essential for literacy. And so we're going to name and practice some specific language supports. But we're going to do that with two contexts in mind as we work. One, the first is relationships. Language is built through interactions, and children don't interact with you because they admire your vocabulary. They interact with you because they want to be and be seen by you. It's personal. And so powerful language interactions happen in the context of strong and caring relationships. And so we're going to make sure we attend to that. The second context that I want to make sure we hold on to today is how each of us shows up. Our mental and emotional stance when we're with children ends up shaping how we think and act with them. So there will be points here where I'm going to want to be intentional with thinking about, so how do we show up in a way that really allows us to join children in powerful interactions? And so hence the title of this workshop, not just building language, but tuning in to build language in powerful interactions. For those of you who are noticing that phrase powerful interaction, some of you maybe have been together here last month when we did a webinar around relationships and powerful interactions. We're going to use that powerful interactions frame again. So for some of you, that'll be familiar. And for others who that's the first time, we'll make sure that we connect on that. This is actually the second in a series of 6 webinars around that powerful interactions theme, but each of them stands alone as well if need be. So I think before we sort of get into looking at our sort of looking at language practices and how children learn language and what we do to scaffold it, let's take a minute to attend to that first piece of how we show up. So let me give you a moment just to settle. And maybe I'll give you this invitation. Imagine you're in an early childhood space with all that goes on in that space, right? We know those are busy places. And there's a child you're going to sit down and interact with. Right? And you want that interaction to matter. Okay. What do you do to sort of bring yourself to that focus and calm so that when that child and you are face to face, that your mind is quiet and present? So let me just give you a moment to sort of imagine or enact that kind of calm. So just how we know, no, I wouldn't need to tell you that a stressed or anxious child interacts with us differently from how a calm, relaxed, or excited child interacts with us. The same is true for us, that how our state of mind shows up. We won't show up dysregulated. Okay, we're not going to, roll on the floor and cry. But we can show up scattered. We can show up unfocused. We can show up distracted, irritated, all kinds of other ways. And so one of the things we'll keep coming back to today is how we're showing up, because that will shape our interactions. So let me look with you at sort of finding some of our shared experience. I'm the one facilitating this, and I'm the one who's supposed to have my mic off mute so that you all can hear me. But everybody here probably interacted with children today, and many of us Saturday and Sunday as well, and every day last week. And so we know lots about language interactions with kids. So let me just invite you to share a little bit about one of your experiences. Just share something a child told you today, and invite you. Let's get some comments in the chat. What kind of things do young kids say to us? Oh, young kids weren't that quiet today. I don't believe that. I'm tired. Yeah, my tummy hurt the yesterday. So we have two children coming to us here with wanting to be seen with something difficult. I'm tired, my tummy hurt. Oh, talking about their birthday, sharing events. Okay. Shared with me that their papa was picking them up today. So they share their excitements and their challenges. I went to Chuck E. Cheese. Yeah. All right. Saw my neighbor this morning. I was out with the dogs. She said, "You're up too early, too." Yeah. Okay. Went to visit a different EC setting. And so even though you weren't the adult in that one, a child that I worked with last year remembered you and told you that they remembered you. I played with my brother. They say they need this and they need everything. Like, and not later, right? Now or sooner would be good. Okay. What they ate for breakfast. Are we going outside? So I want to highlight some of what we see here, just to make some connections here. Some people have made some comments about children essentially wanting to be seen with problems. I'm tired, my tummy hurt. Children wanting to share their delights with you, their birthdays, things that happened over the weekend, going to Chuck E. Cheese, okay, showing their beautiful hair, telling they played with their brother. Why do they talk about what they ate for breakfast? Because it's important? No, but because when they do, they get to talk with you, right? As Laura says, they love to discuss off-topic comments that are unrelated to the lesson. Why? Because when they do, they get to talk with you, right? They want to be seen. So a child hugged you. So, oh, having a baby. So we have children sharing their needs. We have children sharing their inquisitive. What are we going to do today? And then wanting to have, like, they're offering their excitements to you, right? What if you walked down the street in Chicago and adults came up to you and said, "Look at my new shoes," right? We don't do that, right? But children do, because when they do, they connect with, like, actually, Chicago might be better if we did that. I don't know, it might be weirder, but think about what comes from that from children. They're sharing their, as Laura says, they're sharing their emotions with a trusted adult. And sometimes those emotions are hard things. Sometimes they're excitement, but we all, like, you don't do that to the casual people that you walk down the street with in Chicago, but we do that with our bestie, don't we? Or we do that with our partner. We also want to share these things. Children are just like either less filtered, or the other option would be, you really matter in their life, don't you? Okay, you're important to them. They remember you a year later, right? Talked about favorite cereals. Okay, so children are going to talk with us and talk with us and talk with us. And then there will be some that don't. And we're going to notice that too and think about that, right? And so we need to think some about what happens during those interactions and how we can support those children in stepping into those interactions and getting the most out of them. All right. And the three big ideas around that today are going to be: first, the language development just matters, right? And we don't need to take much time on that because you know that, but let's lay that groundwork and attach it to standards, okay? Second, that when we have interactions, we build children's language in two ways. One is the language we offer, the words, okay? What words can children learn? The words they hear people use, right? Okay. But then the other thing that happens is not just what they hear from us, but what happens in those back and forth conversations. Like, so a child told Sarah, my mom is having a baby, right? Okay. So what happens in that conversation after that, right? Or the dad took them to the pumpkin. I'm not sure what a spatchcock is. I'm curious about it. That's not a word I know. But then what happens? What's the next move, right? When they talk about what we're having for breakfast, what happens after they share that information with us? Is it just, oh, that's nice, and we go about our day? Or is there a back and forth conversation? Those conversations matter. And then our third big idea here is that sort of how we show up and tune in for those interactions ends up shaping everything else, because it creates a sensitivity in us that supports effective conversations, and it sends a relationship message as well that children respond to. Okay, so those are like our big three to look for. Let's do the first one fairly quickly. All right, let me just ask you, how do children's language skills matter? What do you see in early childhood? What do we know about later? Let's just get a few comments in the chat box. You don't need me to cite research studies. You live with this every day. Helps them share. So, okay, let's take what Tammy said and generalize that language skills are essential for social skills, aren't they? Right? That children practice all kinds of social interactions because of through their language. And then, as Kyla, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, matters because they can express what they want or need. So their emotional life, their self-awareness, and their ability to get their needs met happens through language. Okay, needs and wants. Lots of comments on needs and wants. So they need to, in order to whatever it might be, from get help because someone took their toy, to they're feeling sad because they miss their mom, whatever that is, they need to be able to express that with language. Okay, their opinions, feeling heard. They gain knowledge by asking questions. So we're going to have a whole nother session at one point about questions, but the quick piece there is they can't enter anything into Google yet. They can't keyboard, right? Although if they're smart about using voice recognition, they can do a lot of stuff. But you can serve as Google, right? Okay, so why is that person wearing that coat? Okay, or how do I do this? They Google you all the time, don't they? Okay, minimizes unexpected. Boy, I really appreciate how people are really tuning into the social emotional. And Claudia, then that building a sense, this is how we connect with each other, right? How do we build community as adults? It's through language, right? So you folks see this every minute of every day in your early childhood communities of children both operating individually and in community through language. I also want to highlight that when children get to higher grades, okay, their language skills are highly predictive of their long-term reading outlook. Okay, and we'll look at this a little more as we get into things. But essentially in early literacy, there's two sets of skills. One is around decoding, knowing the letters and sounds and being able to sound out words. But the other is about making meaning from language. And in the long run, that's the harder skill. All right. And children's ability, I think this shows up somewhere else in our presentation, but I'll just put it right now. There is a strong correlation between children's vocabulary skills entering kindergarten. Okay, entering kindergarten, if you take kids, do measures of the vocabulary, and then come back and do reading comprehension tests in 7th grade, the kids whose vocabulary was higher coming into kindergarten are most likely to also be the ones with the highest levels of reading comprehension 8 years later. Okay, language development is essential for literacy. And so the Hart and Risley study says, oral language is arguably the most crucial area of academic focus during the pre-kindergarten years. It's the means by which we gain knowledge about the world that's been mentioned here. And then what I'm really highlighting too is that it's vital for literacy development. Okay. Now, you folks also remember something that frankly the standards and high school people don't always hang on to, which is that it's essential for their social lives and emotional lives as well. And so not surprisingly, oral language shows up in the Illinois language arts goals and literacy plan. And I don't think we need to go into a great deal of background here, demonstrate increasing competence in oral communication, all right, listening and speaking, okay? And when we look at the Illinois 7 components of literacy, the first one is this kind of odd word, oracy, okay? But we can think of that as oral language, right? That was a new word for me when Illinois introduced that. I'd never heard it referred to as oracy before, but there we are, okay? And when we look at the fundamentals of reading, okay, some of you, we just did a session recently, a webinar recently on alphabet knowledge, and we're going to do another one on phonological awareness. Children absolutely need those decoding skills. That's the blue box. But we're in the green box today, okay? Oral language comprehension. If you can read a word, but you don't know what it means, you're not getting very far, right? And so developing understanding of vocabulary. And if you can read a series of words, but you don't know how to put together complex sentences with clauses and phrases, then you're also not getting very far. So reading comprehension ultimately depends as much on oral language skills as it does on being able to decode. Other reading models simply have more sophisticated versions of this. This is the classic Scarborough reading rope. Language comprehension, they have as the sort of that top set of strands, and you folks have spoken to some of that. That children's vocabulary knowledge is tied to their learning about the world and their language structures. So, this is essential stuff. And the model, the model that Illinois uses, that everybody uses right now, is like the cutting edge. How do we explain all the elements of reading is referred to as the active view of reading model. And we are down in the, what would we call that, sort of reddish, pinkish, somebody's got a better red vocabulary word than I do for that. Anyway, we are all about that language comprehension piece today, all right? Just so it's clear where we fit in. And so let's do a little bit of thinking about language development. And I think one of the things that there are two things that we probably know about language development, okay? First, obviously, that it develops over time, right? There are, not a bunch of 12-month-olds running around making 8-word sentences, right? That children's language develops over time. Another thing we know is that different children develop different language capacities from each other. And one of the characteristics that we commonly describe, we're going to have to think about this some, but that we commonly describe is that children differ in language skills, and some of those differences in language skills can be linked to differences in socioeconomic backgrounds. And we're going to have plenty to say about that, but let's just land with that right now for that families that have had more education and have higher income, their children tend to have stronger language skills as measured on assessments than children who have come from families who do not have as much privilege in income or education. And so, with that in mind, what would you guess is the earliest age at which we can quantify differences between children's language skills based on socioeconomic background? If we start doing assessment, anyone want to take a guess, or maybe or maybe instead of a guess, 2 years, a lot of twos and threes, 5 years old, 18 months. We've got two folks with 18 months. I've not seen one as early as 9 months, Jody. Maybe I'm out of date, but the most recent data I can find suggests by 18 months of age, we can see differences that are equivalent to 6 months of development between children coming from different socioeconomic backgrounds. Okay, and by 2 years, by 2 years, the difference is approximately 6 months. Okay, now there's some real issues with talking about this related to socioeconomics, and we're going to look at that. But what I want to highlight for you is that different children, by the time they reach you in any kind of early childhood program, they are on different trajectories for language growth. Okay, it's the children have already started separating by language proficiency, and so the question is, why? What are some of your thoughts about why some children's language skills grow more rapidly than others? Exposure. It's tough to learn language that you're not exposed to, isn't it? Okay, exposure, read to or talked to, parents reading to them, two-way communication, the quality of the interactions, parents speaking with and not at. Okay, so let's look at a few different things we have here. All right, exposure and being read to. Okay, and then we have some discussion of two-way communication and the quality of the interactions. Okay, and then screen time. Jody, I'm going to interpret that as a limiting factor, actually, right? Not one that promotes, but one that limits. And the research backs that up. And Cheryl says, time spent with adults who communicate and engage in conversations. And I want to lay out with you here that there have essentially been two strong theories supported by research, and one of them is getting considerably more support than the other these days. Not that they don't both matter, but let's attend to them. Okay, the first one, and this would be related to exposure, okay, is that some kids simply hear a whole lot more language than other kids. Okay, and the famous Hart and Risley study broke this down by socioeconomic background. All right, and they compared children in professional families with working class families with people on welfare, and we're going to need to talk about that. But what they saw was on average, okay, some children in higher socioeconomic families were hearing as many, by the time they were 36 months old, they'd heard as many as like 32 million words. Okay, not those aren't all like different vocabulary, but they'd had that much language input. And other kids by 36 months, tending to be from lower socioeconomic, had heard 12 million words. So that's almost 3 times more exposure for some kids than others. All right. And it's tough to learn language if you don't hear it, right? So that has certainly been a very strong theory in the field. All right. And there's research to back it up. All right. I want to play with you just a little bit about the socioeconomic, because remember what I said was on average. This is a graph actually from the Hart and Risley book, the book that sort of laid this out and made it current in the research. And notice that they've got a whole bunch of dots along one professional line and along a working class line and along a welfare line that would seem to suggest that like all families who are professional talk lots and all families who are on welfare don't talk very much, right? And that, in fact, is not what the research says. Okay. I've looked and looked and looked. You will not have this next slide because I finally found a graphic for it. All right. But I want to be clear about this. Okay. The graphs actually look like this. All right. And so what you'll see is that, yes, the more income families have, the more on average language they offer their kids. The more education families have, the more on average they talk with their kids, all right? But notice the scatter of those dots. There are some families who have lots of education who tell their kids to go shut up and sit in the corner. I mean, I'm overstating, but to make the point, right? And and so these numbers back here are averages. And socioeconomic status is not destiny, all right? What matters is, are you talking with your kids? And here's the crucial point, is it's not just how many words you say. It is, as some of you folks described, it's the back and forth conversations. And this is the crucial insight of the last 7 years, is it's not sufficient to talk to children. We have to talk with children. They must have back and forth conversations. And here's the classic study that revealed this. And you might want to Google this. And actually, at some point, Karen's going to put a link in the chat that takes you to a YouTube video that has a really nice 5-minute summary. But I'm going to do the 1-minute summary right here, okay? And so you don't need to go click on the video right now. A research team got a whole bunch of families of all kinds of different backgrounds to participate in a study. And what they had happen was, what they did was they put shirts on the kids that had little pockets in them that they could put recorders in. They're called Lena devices. And for 16 hours a day, these kids were getting all of the language that was around them recorded. And then, so, a bunch of kids, thousands of hours of language samples, all right? And they analyzed those language samples to determine 3 different things, okay? One was how much the parents were talking. Another was how much the kids were talking. And then, crucially, how much back and forth was there between the children and the adults, all right? And then, and boy, it's interesting actually, if you do some of the reading or go to the video, then what they did was they put the kids in fMRI machines and scanned their brains while they were reading them stories and analyzed how their brains responded to the input of a story. And here's what they found, okay? If you look at this diagram down on the bottom left, that's 2 different brain scans, all right? And the one, essentially, what they, what they found was that the children who had lots of language back and forth, okay? So, and we'll talk about that some more in a minute, but where there were back and forth conversations, that brain scan on the left, that's a child who had lots of language back and forths, where when they talked about those shoes, they went back and forth on that for several turns. What they discovered was that those children had more areas of the brain activated when they were read a story, and crucially, they had an area known as Broca's area activated, which is one of the 2 main language processing areas in the brain. And the children who had far fewer language interactions, back and forth language interactions with adults, that's the brain scan on the right. And you can see that literally less of their brain is lighting up and processing, okay? And when they follow those kids out, what they see is that those kids with more brain process, more language brain processing going on, okay, those children are exhibiting much higher much higher listening comprehension when they are being talked with or to or listening to a story, okay? So the key here is conversational turns, okay? And I want to take just a minute with you to give you an example of the kind of thing that's like, what is it that builds, like, what do conversational turns look like? So here's a brief example from a preschool classroom, okay? And got it here in my notes, so I'm going to read it, okay? Teacher says, "Hi, Isabel." Isabel says, "I got new shoes." Teacher says, "Oh, look at those new shoes, bright blue. My daddy took me." "Oh, I remember you said your daddy's car was broken." "We went on the bus." "Whoa, on the bus? Tell me about the bus." "You go up the steps." "What do you do next?" "You get to sit anywhere." "Where did you sit?" "Next to my daddy." "By the window?" "No, daddy was by the window. And there was someone with ice cream, and you're not supposed to eat food." Okay, so that's a 7-turn back and forth conversation. Those are the conversations that we're building those brain capacities. Okay, and I want to take just a moment to notice part of what's going on and think about why that's linked to reading comprehension later on. Okay, that when a child has to hold a concept in mind, oh, I'm talking about my new shoes, and now I'm connecting that to a whole trip on the bus. The cognitive modeling that needs to go on, the stringing together of causal relationships, of sequence, all the rest of that that's complex stuff, okay? And it's not unrelated to what happens when you read a paragraph in a book and feel that paragraph develop, and the characters and the exchange and so on. So these kids, when they're engaged in these back and forth conversations, that's what's landing for making a difference in brain development and ultimately language and literacy development. And Roberta Golnikoff, prominent early childhood literacy researcher, I'll read this and then I'll invite you to just notice a word or phrase in here that you'd highlight. "You can talk to a child until you're blue in the face, but if you're not engaging with that child and having a conversational duet about what the child is interested in, you're not going to give the child the language processing skills they need." If you can get the child to participate, not just listen, that will allow the child to have a better language outcome. So just take a minute there and notice some words or phrases that seem important to you. Conversational duet, absolutely. Participate, engaging. Yeah. So this is, frankly, we're going to need to think about this. Child's interest. Okay, Sandra, thanks. This is a turn and talk, isn't it, Claudia? Yes, absolutely. And one of the reasons we do a turn and talk, and we're going to have to think about this, is I don't know how many children you have in your classroom, but like you're way outnumbered, right? It's tough for us to have one-on-one conversations with kids. And yet, that's essential scaffolding, processing skills, participate. Even when they're just babbling as toddlers, right? We can do this changing diapers when we're with toddlers. Okay, so let's jump in and let me just sort of remind you about where this comes out then. This is Ecker's practice, right? Expanding language, inviting children to learn language. And if anybody in here is in Head Start and using the class, this is sort of both sides of class language modeling, that there's all these sort of skills in the class about giving children language, especially advanced language and self and parallel talk. That fits with the 30 million words idea. But then there are these practices for just encouraging back and forth conversation with children, having frequent conversations, open-ended questions. When we repeat for a child, when the child says, "I got new shoes," and the teacher says, "Oh, you got new shoes?" What's the next thing that happens? The child talks, right? So repetition and extension can function to keep children engaged in conversation. So we're going to kind of take apart all of that. Let's just take a minute and sit and think about this idea of conversations with preschoolers and see what shows up for you, comes to mind. And if there's anything you want to put in the chat, then I'd encourage you to go ahead and do that. So and while you're doing that, I want to highlight Rachel's question about, does this change when children are interacting with other children, children taking conversational turns with each other? So to be clear, there's real value in children doing that with each other, right? It's that same kind of cognitive modeling that needs to go on for that complex chaining and relationships. The challenge, of course, is that it's hard for children to do that well with each other because like we adults, if we get a child talking a lot, we end up doing a lot of scaffolding lots of times, don't we? Okay. And it's difficult for children to do that. Now, some of your children with strong language skills, in whatever language, doesn't matter what language, right? Some of the children with strong language skills, they can do that with each other. Children who have fewer words, who are less confident socially, and who need more support, this is harder, okay? So some comments, how excited they are to share. Yeah. How fast they change topics. Yes, okay? And we have a line to walk on this because we want to support them in being able to stay on a topic. And also we want to support them in being able to keep conversational turns going. And so we make judgments on that. They talk about their own world just like us, right? Except their world is different, okay? Can't wait to share stories about home. They love to show what they know. Okay, repeating back what they say. Yeah, so when we offer something, or when they offer something, when we repeat it back, then that keeps conversations going, and we can extend or build, which builds their background knowledge and gives them new language structures. Yep, how they bring up topics that you've talked about in the past. Children's memory for the words that come out of our mouths is incredible. I remember one time I used to tell stories, and I told a story. One time in April, a child said, "Tell that story about the baby and the peaches," and I was like, my assistant said, "Remember you told this story where this baby did this?" Well, that had been back in October. Okay, and I was, they remembered, right? They hang on to our words. Our words are, become almost part of their architecture. So children love to engage in language with us. Okay, how they do that is limited by their skills and limited by their experience. And nobody particularly noted here, but we should note, not all children do that with the same level of comfort and confidence as other children, right? And so part of our job is to make sure that every child gets engaged. So that's a challenge. And nobody here said that like 7 children want to talk with me at once, but that's another part of this as well, right? So we'll need to be thinking, actually, I want to invite you as we go along and we're talking about strategies that you please make comments and questions either in the chat or out loud to help us think about that. As Tammy says, some prefer a private conversation. And so then that powerful observation. So then how do we provide structures for that person, during the day where I can get, a minute, maybe with that child where there aren't 3 other kids coming at us. And actually, let me just note something. I'll just sort of put it in our working vocabulary right now. One of the challenges that we experience is that if I'm just gonna borrow Antoinette's name here because I can see her name. If I want to have a one-on-one conversation with Antoinette, if I'm sitting at the snack table and Rachel and Samantha and Beth and Justine are also at the snack table and I'm trying to talk with Antoinette, there's a pretty decent chance that at least a couple of those other kids are going to try to get my attention and talk with me while I'm talking with Antoinette, right? That's life in early childhood. And so it's really important that we be able to have ways to take to put children who are it's not yet their turn to talk into a holding pattern. I don't know if any of you live near O'Hare, but you know how like when there's not enough room for planes to land, you get the planes to circle, all right? So finding ways that children can wait so that one child can get good quality attention from me is a really important part of that, okay? Because we want like when it's that plane's turn to land, we don't want anybody else on the runway, right? We want Antoinette to get quality time from me. Now, it's a challenge because at some point, you know, those planes run out of fuel and 3-year-olds run out of fuel pretty quick for waiting, right? And so we need to find ways to do that really support them. But that's a crucial practice. So yeah, or they may join the conversation, and sometimes that works. And so yeah, and Tammy's got a strategy there. All right, and we can think some more about that as we go. I want to just sort of step back to this big idea that conversations happen in the context of relationships, and relationships are built in no small part through the quality of conversations, right? That children who feel comfortable with us are much more likely to come up to us and start a conversation. Children who feel comfortable with us are much more likely to respond openly to a question we have that invites them to talk, right? And the other side of things is that when we do sit with a child and talk with them about their new shoes or about their baby or about their trip on the bus, then they feel seen, they feel valued, and our relationship is stronger. So there's very much a feedback loop between having sensitive, caring conversations with children and building relationships. Those two go hand in hand. All right. In that context, I want to offer this frame of a powerful interaction. Okay. And some of you run into this before, but the idea here is simply this, that we can think about having an intentional process for engaging with children in interactions that will support us in being effective and support them in being receptive. And there's actually a book by the title of Powerful Interactions, whose framework I'm borrowing here. I'm fortunate enough to have two of the authors as colleagues for many years, and we've sort of shared some of this work. But the suggestion I want to make to you that as we enter an interaction, a language interaction with children, that we can be intentional about our steps with it. And what I want to suggest is that the first move is simply bringing ourselves to slow down and be in the moment so that we are with that child. And in the powerful interactions, we talk about that as being present. So slowing down enough that I can be tuned into this child, sensitive to what's going on, and intentional about making a decision. The second step is that when we begin an interaction with a child, that we don't begin with a teaching move. We begin with a relationship move, that we do something that invites that child to feel like they are seen, that we are wanting to be with them. It could be as simple as sitting next to them and saying, "Can I play with you?" It could be making an observation about what they're doing. "Oh, I see you, you are rolling that flat," or whatever it is that's going on, a simple descriptive move, but just something that indicates that we see them, sort of activates the trust and security. And from there, then we make a decision about what's an effective teaching move. Okay. We have seeing what's going on with this child and deciding, okay, here's what I can do that will stretch their learning a little bit in this context. In the context of language, I think the thinking about the be present, connect, and extending learning actually fits very well with the language structure offered by Susskind and folks in the 30 Million Words book. The idea being that the first thing we do to be present is to tune in, okay? Slow down, notice what the child's doing, notice the teacher in that situation is watching, right? Okay. Take a second to watch what's going on here. That we then engage in some kind of connecting move that involves taking turns where we have a shared reciprocal interaction. And then from there, maybe we offer language that stretches the child in either their thinking or just in their language. All right. Now, that first step, that being present or that tuning in, is about how we are. And I just want to, remind us of this, highlight this for us. When, like, you have all kinds of things on your lesson plan. One of the things we don't put on our lesson plan is how I'm going to show up. All right. And yet, how we show up has a powerful effect on every move. If I show up focused, warm, relaxed, I'm going to have one set of interactions with children. If I show up irritated, urgent, scattered, on edge, I'm going to have a different set of interactions, no matter what my training is, no matter what my intention is. And so being intentional about how we show up matters. So let's take a second on this idea of being present and tuning in. Take for a moment, I want you to think for a moment about, like, what does the idea of tuning in suggest to you? Maybe with other adults? No? Is there an adult who tunes in to you? What's that look like? What's that feel like? Generally, when someone tunes in, they slow down, that they make eye contact, they're welcoming, they put the phone down, okay? They're comforting. Boy, like three affirmations here for putting down the phone, right? And in fact, we know that those devices are changing the home interaction lives of children, right? And so it becomes all the more critical that we provide that opportunity where the phone's down, we're making the eye contact, intentionally trying to engage, listening to understand rather than listening to respond. Thank you for that, Michelle. Kyle, I so appreciate the other side of that is when the person isn't tuned in, don't you? And deflated is, yeah. And children feel the same way, right? So, so we want to offer, I mean, just like when you're sitting with a friend and having coffee, or sitting with your partner on the couch or at the dining room table, or whatever that is, we want to offer children that moment with us of us being tuned in. I want to show you just a little video clip, and it's not the most awesome video clip in the world, and it doesn't last very long. Thank you, Keela. I appreciate that. And I never know, like, people get to pronounce their names the way they want to pronounce them, and I thank you for helping me be respectful. And so let's just notice this teacher, and I think it's about 10 or 15 seconds. And like I say, it's not rocket science. It's not even the best example ever, but you'll see her, I think, doing at least a little bit, no, more than a little bit, like making an effort to slow down, tune in with this child. And let's just see what you notice and what we can name. That's it. What'd you see? Or what'd you hear? What'd you notice? This isn't rocket science, but it is little moves.
She pulled up her chair and she was completely engaged.
Okay, she pulled up her chair. She was completely engaged. Her focus is right there with that child, isn't it? Okay, at his level. Okay, got to asking questions. She didn't start asking him questions about what shape it was, though, right? She asked him a question about, like, is this a balcony, about what he made? Okay, asked about it. And then he told her to play. So, like, who's in charge here? He kind of is, isn't he? Ask questions. Oh, thank you. Jody says watched, right? She started by watching. In fact, like, I think she was worried it was going to fall at first. She put her hand up and then it's like, oh, no, I guess it's all right. But she didn't take 20 seconds to watch, but she took long enough to watch that it's like, oh, I can see, she got a little bit of a sense of what's going on. So she's at his level. She's, in the chair. She's watching. She's asking question. She's no, he actually initiated the conversation, didn't he? The first words came from him, and then he invited her into the play, right? So I, like I say, this is not the most, like she's not going to win like a Nobel Prize for tuning in or anything, but she's making the moves that allow her to notice what that child's doing so that she'll be on that child's agenda and for that child to feel like they're seen, right? And something that, like, we mentioned her, that she's down at eye level. Did you also, like, if you look at both of their eyes go to the same place, right? She's looking at what he's looking at, right? That the phrase there is joint attention. All right. So just a couple highlights here. What do we know about ways to sort of be present and connect? One is we have our attention here, right? Her attention was there. Her eyes didn't go someplace else. She also was noticing the child's, like, she was watching what the child was doing. She valued what the child said and she just made a fit. Oh, is that a balcony? She sort of fit in to what that child's play was about. So, like I say, it's not rocket science, but it is a step that's easy to miss if what we're doing is like coming over there and trying to get an interaction going because we've got to get our TS Gold assessment done or whatever it is, right? She's focused on what that child is doing, watching and paying attention, and then asking questions. I want that phrase joint attention, okay? Language interaction happens most powerfully when the adult and the child's attention are both focused on the same point of engagement, right? We're both talking about the same thing. There's two ways to get joint attention, all right? One way is to join what the child's paying attention to. The other way is for the adults to try to make the child pay attention to something. We'd never name it that way, right? But if she'd come over there and started saying, oh, so what shape is this? And let's count how many blocks or whatever that might be, she'd be like in charge of the attention. But it's just like if you're having a conversation with a friend, like if you really want to give them some space, you talk about what they're interested in, right? And the same is true with children, and it's especially true with children because it's really hard for them to focus on somebody else's idea, right? So, although what I'm wanting to talk about now is Justine's dogs. Thank you. We should all talk about dogs right now. But I shouldn't have raised that as a distractor. But actually, let me use that as this. Okay, when you're in a classroom, you don't get distracted by dogs. Most classrooms, right? But there are a lot of things that make it hard for you to sit down with that child and put your eyes on their play structure and listen to them talk and join them in their play, right? Can we name some of the things that make it hard to find that space? That time, that mental energy, that clear thinking? What's some of the static? Other children. Boy, wouldn't it be nice if we only had one? Yeah, okay. TS Gold assessments. Absolutely, right? You've got the gold assessment in your head instead of the child, right? Exhaustion, fire drills, behavior, other children. Okay, transitions, the timer, the clock. Does anybody have a personal life that sometimes their thoughts about their personal life show up, right? Okay, you're wanting to check your phone because you're worried about your own kid or whatever that might be. The schedule, what they need to get done. Okay, so this is the point in the workshop where if I had two extra teaching assistants to pull out and put into the chat and send to each of you, I would right now, right? Parent calls, but I don't. So I want to be clear. You're not going to get that kind of interaction every day, all day long. All right. What I do want to suggest is that we try to be intentional about finding the spaces for it where we can. All right. Look for it where we can, and especially to look for it with the children for whom our sense is it would be most valuable. So somebody earlier mentioned a child that does better with private time. Let's find the private time for that child. A child who's more shy and retiring, a child who struggles with language skills, a child who isn't as confident in their relationship with me. Who are the people who I need to make sure I find time with? All right. It would be lovely if we found some of that kind of time for every child every week, at least, and I think in a previous workshop we actually talked some about how if I and an assistant are in a classroom and I take 3 children a day and she takes 3 children a day, something like that, then we can get around to everybody a couple times in the week or something like that. So I want to be clear. I don't want to set impossible standards for everybody, but I also want to be clear that if we want to have these kinds of conversations with children, we are likely going to have to be intentional about them, okay? Because there's so much static. And if we're just waiting for the time when there are no parent calls and there's no behavior issues or whatever that is, that moment will never show up, right? And so trying to find the time where we can. Let me just pause there. Any comments about that or check-ins, or anybody found secret funding in Illinois to get 4 more assistants for each? No, it's not happening, right? So, and I do want to highlight that, like, there are all these things that are on our schedule. Like, you will read a story every single day, right? And you should, absolutely, you should, right? Okay. That's on your lesson plan. And if you don't read a story every day, someone will know that, okay? And that'll be a problem. It is as essential that we try to maximize our language interactions with kids as it is to read those stories, okay? I don't know how that goes onto a lesson plan, but if we can find that opportunity, then that matters, okay? Yeah, sometimes child arrives hungry. It would be lovely if when that child arrives hungry, that's an opportunity for us to sit down and have a conversation with them while they eat, wouldn't it be? That would be my ideal, and you know, do what we can do. So let me, those of you who were in the session back in September, we talked about one strategy for engaging with children called mirror talk, and I'm not going to spend a bunch of time with that here. Those of you who are involved, who use the class, this is basically the same strategy as self and parallel talk. One way to connect with children is to essentially describe what they're doing, okay? And that is very affirming for children, okay? Child's painting, and the teacher says, "Oh, I notice you put spots on your giraffe." Simply describing, okay? That mirror talk. "Oh, this is what you did." When you do that, children feel seen, right? They feel connected with, "Oh, I see your giraffe has a smile." That child lit up when the teacher said that, okay? So one simple way to connect. Here's kind of the collection of language strategies that you will see if you sort of look at the research. And I've used the terms that are used in Powerful Interactions book, all right? In just a moment, I'm going to show you the terms that are used in Classroom Assessment Scoring System for those of you who are in Head Start. But essentially, we're trying to do 2 different things, okay? We need strategies to engage children in turn-taking with conversations, okay? And some children, that's really easy. We just start talking and they keep talking, right? Other children, we need to offer a whole lot of scaffolding. So we want conversations with lots of turns. And then in the midst of that, we also do want to be giving children language, okay? What words can children learn? The words they hear from us, okay? If you use the word association, they will learn the word association, okay? If you use it in context enough times, right? So we're going to look at how we take turns and how we talk more. I've had a child say in the past, I know that. Well, they're awfully smart, and good thing that they're the teacher sometimes. So we're going to look at the taking turns part first. And I want to offer a phrase. I don't know if it's one that's still in wide circulation or not, but back when we were doing a whole lot of work around oral language with some folks in Tennessee, the researchers there, a fellow by the name of David Dickinson, came up with this phrase, strive for five. And the idea here is that we want to engage in back and forth conversations when possible of at least 5 conversational turns, okay? And there's nothing magic about 5. If you do 4, you do 6, 12's better, whatever. But what we don't want to have happen is this. Child says, look at my painting. And we go, good job, okay? Instead, we want, look at my painting. Oh, look at all that blue right in the middle. That's one conversational turn. Yeah, that's the monster. The monster? Oh, I think I see some eyes. Are those the eyes? Now we've got 2 conversational turns. Yeah, and he's real mean. He's eating the fish. The fish? Where's the fish? Right there. Okay, now we got 3 conversational turns, okay? Those back and forth turns. And the longer that goes on, the more complex the language processing for the child. And so we want to support that continuation. Now, there are 2 things in my observation that kill that, okay? One is when that child comes over and says, look at my monster. And I go, oh, what shape is the monster? And they go circle. And then I go, what color is the monster? And they go blue. Done, all right? So those quiz questions kill it. The other thing that kills it, actually, we discovered this in a oral language project in North Carolina. We had dozens of hours of video of adult-child interaction, and what we decided to look for was what ended conversations. Okay, and we found 2 shining characteristics that ended many conversations. First was, if it was the adult or the child that ended the conversation, guess who usually ended it? Usually the adult was the one who ended the conversation. And one phrase that adults seemed to use to end conversations was good job. Okay, a child would come and show their painting. Oh, look at my painting. And the teacher would say, good job. And then the teacher would turn and go do something else. Okay, so I don't know if that's a phrase you use, but what I'd encourage you to do out of that is I encourage you to monitor what keeps conversations going and what stops them. And do I have any ways of we often want to get on to the next thing, right? So just notice your own conversation patterns. Those are a couple that tend to shut them down, all right? Some things that keep them going. Tuned in questions, okay? Asking questions. When I say tuned in questions that children are interested in answering because they're about what's important to that child, all right? So I want to just show you a short little video clip of a child doing some building with parquetry blocks. And I want to invite you to do 2 things, okay? End product thing I want to invite you to do is to ask a tuned in question, all right? But the suggestion that I want to make for you to get there is to be curious about the child's experience. Like, what's the child thinking about and caring about right now? Because that'll help us ask a tuned in question. So here we go. It's just not very long, 15 seconds or so. What do you notice this child doing? And then can we think of any questions that we might ask this child that would be engaging for the child? That's it. Like 10 seconds. What did you notice? Let's start with this. Like, just check for yourself. What did you notice the child do? What might the child be thinking or feeling? Oops. And then, any questions we might ask? Child seems very focused. Okay, that observation fits for me. They were right there, right? Tell me about what you're building. Nice general open-ended. What happened to the blocks? Why do you think that happened? How do you fix it? What could you do to keep the middle? That's their problem, isn't it? Okay, and I want to just highlight that there's going back here. There's all kinds of things we could ask, right? And it's always it's a safe question to say, tell me about what you're making with the blocks. And there's nothing wrong with that question, right? What if we sort of imagine about this child's experience, what I took from what Cheryl asked, like back behind there, was that this child's problem was, oh, this is falling down. Okay, what am I going to do about that, right? And if our questions focus in on what's important to that child, then they're going to have something to say, right? Because it matters to them, right? What happened? That's an open-ended question that invites them to talk about their problem. But that you notice that, like, that is like that in effect says, I saw that fall down. That's a bummer, right? What happened? Okay. So yeah, and Michelle is focusing right in then on where those blocks were sliding, right? And just that, I want to just hold up that careful noticing that you did. And when you do that careful noticing, first off, like, the child gets it. Okay, you're watching me. Okay, I like being noticed by you. You really noticed me. And joint attention, my brain, I'm the child. My brain is trying to figure out how to fix this problem. Your brain just joined and helped me. We're a team, right? So I'm going to want to talk about this with you. I'm going to want to think about this with you. I might have a hard time coming up with the language for it, okay? Because the language is hard. Like Rachel offers here, I noticed you're straightening the blocks. You're going to need to offer that word straightening, because they're not going to, in all likelihood, be able to pull that word up, right? But if you offer that word and it's focused on that, and you show them a little bit about what that straightening is, then we can talk about that, right? So that careful paying attention, and that those questions about what matters to them, right? Tuned in questions. There we go. You got it. All right. So tuned in questions, one strategy. It is possible to engage children in back and forth conversations without asking any questions. And frankly, some children find it hard to answer questions, right? That's a cognitive load for some children, or it's a language challenge. So I want to show you another interaction. And I'm using the phrase serve and return here, which is often a way people think about sort of having these that 5-turn conversation, serve and return. The idea is the child serves it and we return it. But instead of like trying to hit it someplace they can't reach it, we want to hit it right to their sweet spot so they can hit it back, right? So I want to play a little video of Ms. Lovely engaged in some serve and return. And I want to apologize for the quality of the video. It's an old video, but like the example is just too good. So let me just share Ms. Lovely's, and we'll talk about what her superpower is here.
Hi, my friends.
We're making a house.
Oh, you're making a house?
I in a big bed.
It's a what?
I in a big bed.
A big bed?
And I'm not a little bed. My mommy buy me and my brother a bunk bed.
Mommy bought you a bunk bed?
My mommy is. She gotta get somebody to get it down.
Oh, so she's going to buy you a bunk bed, but she has to get someone to take your other bed down?
Yeah. I'm gonna get a bunk bed.
That sounds exciting.
One on the top and one on
One on the top and one on the
I'm
bottom.
gonna be on top. My brother is big. That's why I have to be on top.
Your brother's too big. That's why you're going to be
Yeah.
on the top. Oh.
When he be sleeping, I be sleeping up there. He'll be getting up there, and I'm gonna be rolling over, and I'm gonna push him off.
You're going to roll over and push him off the top of the bed. Sounds to me like your brother needs to stay on that bottom bunk, huh?
My bed is so cool too.
Your bed is cool too?
Look at my bed.
I see that
My
bed you
is
guys built.
Transformer.
It's a transformer bed?
And I got a basketball in here.
My bed is cool too. Your bed is cool too? It's a transformer bed. It's a transformer bed? What's going on there? I mean, the word is repeating, right? She's not doing much more than simply repeating what the child said. Okay. Now, I want to be clear, that is not the most powerful language stimulation possible. All right. But did it encourage children to keep taking turns? Absolutely. Those kids, like, they're gonna keep talking. Like, we've learned about bunk beds, we've learned about disassembling old beds, we've learned about sleeping up top and their brother. We've learned about somebody else's bed and transformer beds, right? So I want to offer you, if you can't think of anything else to do and a child serves it to you, just serve them the same thing right back, okay? I mean, there's value in extending and there's value in asking questions. I also want to highlight too, though, for like a child who has who's like having some challenges with language, this is a really safe place to be, right? Because for some kids, when we ask them a question, it's like, ah, right? And as Martin says, it shows that she's hearing them, right? And simply being seen is big for a lot of kids. So that repetition. Now, thank you, Bobby. As a teacher, it's a challenge. We always want to ask questions, and sometimes questions are a beautiful move. And for some children, at some times, a question actually leaves them stuck. Okay, because oftentimes because they don't have the language to answer it well, or because they lack the social confidence, or simply because they that's not what they want to talk about. They want to talk about something else, right? And so when a very open-ended, safe language support kit thing for a child is to simply go, a bunk bed? And they'll go, yeah, I got a bunk bed on top. Oh, you're on top? Yeah, my brother's on the bottom. Oh, your brother's on the, and there we go. Strive for 5. We got 10. Um, now, if we want to increase the value, okay, when we repeat, then we can stretch out a little bit of what they say. Okay, so when a child says, I gonna go fast, I gonna go fast, we can reformulate that into a more standard or conventional English. You're going fast, right? Or we can stretch it out some. You're going to push the car fast. And the child says, it's broken. We can go, oh no, the ramp is broken. The child says, I got the ball. We can say, you have a ball, you're holding the red, whatever that might be. So we don't have to offer back exactly the same words. And when we offer back other words, we can give children language constructions that they might not know, and we can insert vocabulary that they might still be learning, right? So that's the extension part of repetition and extension. I think given that it's 5:14, I'm going to leave you for practicing at another time. And take a pause here for a moment and just invite you to take a moment to just, this is sort of our culminating piece on the taking turns. And just if there are things that you want to hold on to about taking turns, give yourself a moment to reflect on that, jot any notes, set any purposes, highlight any it might be new learning, or it might just be a reminder of some things that you want to do with more regularity or intention. I'll give you a moment there. All right, so let's take our last 15 minutes and look at this section of extending learning through offering some language that children don't know yet, all right? And the idea here simply is that in addition to supporting children in using language, that modeling of the back and forth, that we can also offer children the phrase that I see used is like we can give children language as well, right? And the idea here is that when we offer words and provide information about them, then children take those words in. And in powerful interactions, this would be mirror talk or using rich language. Those of you who use the class tool, it would be self and parallel talk, advanced language, and repetition and extension when we move into the more complex extension. And the idea here is that, of course, we still stay tuned in, because when we're tuned in, then we're making moves that fit for that child, and we are giving that giving that child that sense of them being seen and valued. And what we want to do is we want to sort of offer language, but about something that is related to the objects and actions that the child is engaged in. Okay, that the child's interested in. So like back when the child was using the parquetry blocks, when we offer the word straightened, that word straightened is a powerful word in that context because they're busy straightening, right? Okay, so language that fits what their brain is focused on, all right? And if we do that in contexts that matter to them and in ways that offer meaning, then they'll hang on to those words. And I want to try to give you that experience of what it's like for a child to hear language that they don't know, but in a context that gives them meaning. So I'm going to make the assumption that most of us here have not spent a lot of time, retiling your countertop and putting in fresh grout, okay? If you have, then this is vocabulary you may already have. But if you haven't, then I'm going to give you a language experience, and we're going to see if you learn some new vocabulary, all right? So, roll it, Ron.
Introducing Goodwill VIP.
Oh, shoot. Wasn't supposed to have an ad, excuse me. I've never had an ad there before. Here we go. All right. My apologies.
The most vulnerable part of a tile countertop is the grout between the tiles, especially near the sink right here where it gets a lot of water and a lot of scrubbing. In fact, this countertop, if you look closely here, you'll see the grout is practically worn away. That means that water can go between the tiles and rot the countertop underneath. Now the first step is to remove as much of the old, discolored, crumbling grout as you can. And the tool to do that with is this. It's called a grout saw. It's a piece of steel or steel blade right here with some carbide steel welded right along the edge. This is very hard stuff. And it's very simple to use this. Just place it on the grout and run it back and forth like this. Now there are two reasons for doing this. The first is that it will remove a lot of the discolored grout, the old discolored grout. Secondly, it'll create a place for the new grout to go, kind of a depression. With the old grout gone, now it's ready to put some new grout in. You want to start by dampening the joints here with a sponge. Use a rubber float to force the grout into the joints between the tiles. Tip it up at about 45 degrees. Now be sure you go on a diagonal from one corner of the tile to the other. Give the grout a few minutes to set up, and then wash the surface of the tiles with a sponge. You may have to do this 2 or 3 times. Change the water as often as needed to keep it clean. Give the tile a final buffing with a paper towel to remove any haze. And then say goodbye to that grungy old grout and hello to the new.
All right, goodbye to that grungy old grout. If you're trying to get rid of that grungy old grout, you need these two tools. Anybody name either of those for us? A rubber float. We got a rubber float and a grout saw. Yeah, now, did you know those terms 2 minutes ago? Right. How did we learn those? Somebody used those words in a meaningful context, right? And if the custodian came into your classroom and said, Mr. Jonathan, your grout is in bad shape. I need to take my grout saw and then I need to take my rubber float. I'll promise you all the kids in your classroom would know grout saw and rubber float, right? It's the same way. It's the same way that they learn words. And so, I mean, what we know is that if we use words that children don't know about something that they're interested in and give them a little bit of information about that word, then, you know, in this instance, if the teacher talked about the slope and the ramp and the design, children would learn those words. Oh, I see this one has a much steeper slope. Yeah, I see you have 2 ramps, but this one has a steeper slope. Kids would learn those words, right? So I want to show you a little clip of a teacher using some challenging words in an interaction. And let's just see what we notice about the words that she offers and how she supports the kids in learning them, all right? And need to give a shout out to this teacher here who you will see all these people lined up along the side. We were doing early literacy professional development. So sitting in the classroom with her is not only me, the guy from out of town, but also the literacy coach and her principal. But here she goes anyway, right? So it's possible to have good interactions under any kind of circumstance.
You're gonna make something easier. How are you gonna do that? How? You're gonna work together. Okay, that could be one possible solution. What do you think is gonna happen if you put another block on top? That one looks a little longer. That one looks a little thicker. Oh, it looks like they're all still. It's all still steady. All just balancing. Oh, one more is on top. That one looks a little slimmer. That one looks a little long. Let's see what's gonna happen. Is it balancing? Is it, wait, balancing means that it's still standing up super tall. Is it still standing up? So is it balancing? Yeah, it's balancing. What do you think will happen if we put another block on top?
It will fall down.
Why do you think it will fall down?
Because you will be sad if it falls down.
It'll be set. How about we test this theory? Another block. It just collapsed. It just fell down. What happened? Was our theory correct though? If we put another block on top, did it fall down? No! So our theory was correct. So what are you going to do now? You're going to build another one? So what are you going to do differently this time? What are you going to do differently? You're going to
I'm going to stop there in the interest of time. So, oops. What'd you notice? Was your theory correct? Yes, steady and balancing, test this theory. That was almost like vocabulary overload, perhaps, right? I mean, there was so much in there. Okay, steady, balancing, test this theory, collapse. Okay. So I want to highlight that like some of those words got more support than others, right? She gave a very explicit definition of balancing, whereas you know, some of the words like theory was used much more informally. There wasn't an explanation of theory, but she's putting words in there that if they're used in meaningful context, then children are going to get like a first fast mapping anyway. And when we do repeated opportunities, then children observe, take those words in. Now, I want to be clear that it is actually challenging to come up with that kind of language in the middle of those interactions, right? And so what she does, like it's much easier for, as I put in the notes here, for fell down to come out of your mouth and collapse. She and her assistant actually went around to different centers during a professional development day and sat in those centers and talked about how kids would use the materials and what kinds of words they might use to support that. And the idea here is the strategy is they called it banking words. Okay, and just because like when you're in the moment and you're managing 5 kids, and you know in this instance you've got your principal and everybody watching even, but like you know you've got a lot going on. it's difficult to think of those things in the moment. And so taking a little bit of time. I want to highlight what's in the information in this particular slide here. I want to note that there's like 3 categories of words, all right, that we can think about being intentional about. Nouns, adjectives, and verbs. And I highlight that because my observation is that that sometimes when teachers take the time to think more carefully about, like, so what are these objects named? Okay, that's the nouns. What do children do with them? Okay, that's the verbs. And then what are the qualities of these, long, short, whatever, that's the adjectives. Then they actually come up with lots of different kinds of words. You take this to the sand table, like, okay, we've got sand, but what are the actions that children make with the sand? And what are the qualities of those actions and so on? Then we come up with lots of words, all right? So a hint on that, remember when we were talking about tuning in? One of the things that happens when you look really closely at what children are doing, you get more specific in your words, which is key for vocabulary. So, boy, 4 minutes left. So I'm going to just give a note here that, take a little bit of time to think about, is there an aspect of this talking more that you would find valuable? And let's take a couple minutes just for some sort of quick reminders on the big ideas here. The first is that conversations and relationships are intimately linked. That when we can, when children feel safe with us, when children feel open with us, then they want to share language with us, and we are able to have more extended conversations with them. And when we take the time to really notice and listen and engage with children and be curious about them and want to know about their worlds and share those worlds with us, then relationships are nurtured, all right? I also want to highlight that when we didn't say this, but I'll just highlight this, that like when conversations go badly, that is also a relationship move. So when I take that child who is shy and quiet and not confident in their language skills, and I try to pump them, that's a relationship move as well that doesn't stand us in good stead. And so engaging in interactions that feel good for children matters both for language and relationships. This 3-step structure is supportive of that: tuning in, connecting, extending learning. Here's a way to see that with language as well. Okay. And I just invite you to think about what you'd like to do with your next steps of strengthening conversations. I hung on to this quote from a teacher that I worked with in Georgia, where she was, one of her phrases was, "Listen so you can hear my voice," which sometimes kids need to do, right? She said, "Now I want to learn to listen so I hear their voice." And both sides of that matter. So thank you for your time. We are having some other future sessions around building skills around this notion of powerful interactions. I think my final thought would be, if we tune in and have interactions with children that are sensitive to them, that scaffold them, that they feel good about, and that we stretch, everybody ends up better for that. And we'll get what we need for TS Gold. The best data comes out of good interactions. And so let's try to be there with kids. Thank you.